In this video, I'll be going over a roadmap to becoming a front-end engineer. As a software engineer, I have worked on many projects from a thought to the finish line, and in this video, I'll be giving you the map to becoming a front-end engineer in the industry. Let's go. Alright, so the first steps, well, learn HTML and CSS. That is the foundation. HTML is the skeleton, and CSS is like the skin and the clothes. You know, it makes it all look good. So learn HTML and CSS. There are many resources for it. There's YouTube, there's Khan Academy, there's W3 Academy. There's just so many resources that you can utilize, and I'll leave some of that in the description. But HTML and CSS is what you should learn first. And then after that, you can create a project with what you just learned. So creating and finishing projects will help you keep the knowledge that you just learned stick in your brain. My first project, by the way, was awful. I showed it to a friend and they thought it was a PowerPoint slide, but it was bad. But I started and I knew with time that I would improve. So don't just think you're a boy wonder or a woman wonder and you're gonna be able to learn everything in just one sitting. It's gonna take time. It's gonna take a couple projects. Yeah, some people are able to pick it up faster than others, but just give yourself time to learn it, love it, and understand it. So yeah, I recommend building a couple of projects utilizing HTML, CSS. My first real project with direction was a portfolio website, and I used cool things with HTML, CSS like parallax and a hero image to make it look all nice. Parallax provides like a cool scrolling effect, and a hero image is like a big image that the user sees when they first get on your website. So yeah, I utilized CSS and HTML for that, and I made my site responsive using CSS media, right? And it made it look pretty on mobile and desktop applications. So that's stuff that you should be learning with HTML and CSS. Just learn how to make a nice looking application just with bare bones stuff. You can get pretty far with HTML and CSS. Or another thing that you could do is you could find a website that you like. It could be a very basic one, but find a website that you like and just try to recreate that with HTML and CSS. And then after that, you can go on to the next step. The next step is JavaScript. So next, we can start putting some dynamic actions on your website. And that's what JavaScript is used for. JavaScript is not Java. JavaScript is used all over the web. And JavaScript is a scripting language that enables you to create dynamic content, right? It allows you to control multimedia, animate images, and animate so many more things on your application or on your website. This is a great time to understand what HTTP is and what is an API call. And with JavaScript, you can learn how to update and manipulate data on a web page. So if you want to create a form, if you want to take inputs, you can utilize JavaScript for all of that. That's all possible with JavaScript. And if you want to have a more structured approach of it, you can also learn TypeScript. It's a strongly typed language that is built on top of JavaScript, so you can look into that as well. So cool, you got an understanding of JavaScript. Let's move on to the next stage. So the next stage is learning Git. Git is a version control system used for tracking changes in computer files, and usually those computer files are your code, right? So it could be your JavaScript file, it could be your HTML file, your CSS file. Those changes are tracked, and you can use it in conjunction with a repository like GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket, where you can store those changes, or you can store those tracked changes to a repository. So every single time you make a change or you push to GitHub and GitLab, you can see when it was pushed, and you can have all your code structured in one central location. So learn Git and get comfortable with a repository like GitLab, GitHub, or Bitbucket. So the next step is deploying your static site. So you got HTML, you got CSS, you got JavaScript, you know Git, you have your code in a repository, and now a nice moral booster is to show what you did. So back in the day, there used to be Heroku, but I believe it's not free anymore. So you could use Netlify or GitHub Pages, since you guys, if you already have your code in GitHub, they can utilize GitHub Pages, which at this time, both of these programs are free to deploy static pages. and you can take your code that you just created and you can deploy that site. Learn about domain name system, which is DNS for short. Expand on HTTP and what is web hosting. Usually when you create a website using GitHub Pages or Netlify, the domain name is random. So just like, google.com, that's a domain name, right? So usually they give you a random name for the website that you hosted. But a plus that can help, or a bonus point while you're on this journey, is buying your own domain, right? My first domain name that I ever bought was my own name. And if, say for instance, your first static website is your portfolio, like you're making a portfolio site, you can have your name as a domain. So buy a domain from a provider like Namecheap and connect your site to that domain. And that'll be great. Now you can show people what you worked on, and it'll be a nice little more booster to show that you're really on your way in this journey. The next thing is to understand and learn and pick a package manager. So there are two main ones that I usually utilize. You have npm and you have yarn. npm means node package manager. npm is a default package manager for JavaScript. And then you have yarn, which is a very established open source package manager, and it's similar in the fact that it is used to manage JavaScript dependencies for projects. And really the main difference is, while npm fetch packages from the online npm registry for every install, because usually you have to do a command like npm install, and you'll understand this when you start to dive into learning package managers. Yarn stores your dependencies locally in most cases and fetches the packages from your local disk. So oftentimes this makes Yarn considerably faster than npm when it comes to fetching packages. So really, it's just personal preference. I usually use npm, but some people swear by Yarn. You just got to choose one, or sometimes you can use one or the other. Like you could switch in between, whatever floats your boat, but just understand what it does and go on from there. Now this is starting to get to the fun part. It's all fun, but this is where people really start to have more fun, is learning frameworks. So popular front-end frameworks are React, and React is not necessarily the framework, but the frameworks that entails or utilizes React is Next.js, Gatsby, Create React App, which creates a React application for you. But yeah, there are a lot. You can choose between, React, a React framework, Vue.js, Svelte, Angular, and much more. React is the most popular at the time of making this video, and it's component based, and it helps render individual pieces on a page. So say for instance you have a page on your screen, right? A search bar would be an individual component. An image would probably be an individual component. So each item on that page are individual pieces. And these frameworks are often used on an enterprise level. I've used React a lot. I've seen Angular used. I've seen Vue, and Svelte is on its way up. So these are very popular frameworks that you can learn. You really have to go in and choose which one that you like the most. But if you're trying to find a job, like I said, the most popular one is React. So that's probably the best thing to learn right now. And then maybe in the future you can pick up something else. But React is pretty popular, and I know Angular is pretty popular as well. So you learned CSS already, but now you can take your CSS to another level by using a CSS framework like Tailwind and Bootstrap. These are design frameworks that make your designing process way faster. For simple projects, I often use Bootstrap because it has like a grid system, and essentially what a grid system is that you can define the spacing of each individual item on a screen. So for each different device size, so say for instance you're on a tablet, you're on a desktop, you're on a mobile device, with the grid system it can compress or expand based on the device that you're on. So Bootstrap, Tailwind, Semantic, Material, they all have that a version of the grid system, which is great. And now you don't have to set it all up yourself using media. You can utilize a CSS framework for that, or they have predefined class names for colors and accordions, and there's so many things that you can do that are already created using these frameworks. So you can go through, pick one. I know right now Tailwind is very popular. Bootstrap I've been using since I was in high school, so it's been used for a long time, so I trust it, and I just recently used it actually. But I know Tailwind is very popular right now, so just get an understanding of just choosing one and just going with it is very important. I know Material UI is used a lot with React. I think it's exclusively for React, but Material UI is very popular when it comes to combining it with a React application. So these are the popular CSS frameworks. And just really understanding the principles of responsive web design using a CSS framework like Bootstrap or CSS Grid. Really, the main thing is understanding the principles of responsive web design, and using these CSS frameworks to get things done is pretty important in this step. So from here, you can learn about linting and keeping your code clean using packages like ESLint and Prettier. So what exactly is linting? Well, linting does static code analysis, right? So it helps flag against programming errors, bugs, stylistic errors, and suspicious construction of code. You can create rules to flag different coding conventions, like adding a semicolon to the end of a line, or adding the proper tab spacing. You can create a file that adds rules on how you want your code to look like. And this is pretty important when you're working on a team and you want the code to be structured the same throughout the application. You can have a list of rules that are done utilizing linting to make sure that the application is the same throughout, so that nobody gets confused or nobody adds their own convention or their own styling convention to the application. Everybody has to utilize the same rules. And then you can have a code formatter to make sure that your code is consistent and clean. So you have things like Prettier, where Prettier makes sure that with those rules that you created, when you save after coding, after a nice little coding session, and you save, it will automatically structure your code to the set of rules that you define. So you don't have to do that manually. You can just use Prettier, which is a code formatter that automatically formats your code. So together, it's a pretty great tandem. And then there's testing. Learn to test your code to avoid problems. And there are many testing libraries to utilize based on the framework that you chose. So, whether you chose React, Vue, Svelte, there's usually a testing library for it. So for example, in React, there's a React testing library that you can utilize to do things such as unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, and more. And this is probably not making sense, but this is just essentially giving you a checklist on things that you should go and learn. This is the journey, right? So you can use libraries to do automation tests, right? Meaning that it'll go into a website, it'll go into a browser and click through different things on your website to test the functionality of your website. And you can use libraries or JS libraries like Playwright and Cypress to help with the automation test. It's called automation testing because it's automated and it's testing different features on that website to make sure that it's doing the expected behavior, right? So open up a browser, test the actions that occur, like I said, such as input and clicking. And this is perfect for dynamic pages. So whenever you do an action, we expect an action to occur, such like a pop-up or going to another page. This can all be tested using automation testing. Put that all together, do clean code and test your code, right? We want to make sure that your application is running properly. You did all the hard work of coding, finish it off by writing some clean code and testing it. Then the next step is security and authentication. It's very important to understand these things. So learn about security and authentication strategies. It's useful to know the difference between authorization and authentication. Learn about what a JWT token is and sessions. There are different ways of making sure that the person is who the person say they are, and how they can authenticate that the person's who they really are. And based on the authentication, they're now authorized to use what they're trying to do. So understand the difference between authentication and authorization. Learn about storage of data, such as cookies and local storage, and what you could put in local storage and what not to put in local storage. Learn about security rules and OAuth risk. And really, there's a lot of rules when it comes to security. I had to take a whole class on it in university, and that still wasn't enough. 16 weeks, and there was still more rules to learn, because every day there's somebody that's trying to take something from you, especially on the web. So there's always new risk, new rules to learn. So just make sure that you're on top of at least the popular ones, right? At least the more obvious ones, right? So learn about security in that front. Then after there's security measures taken and your website is running, understand performance optimization. Understanding performance of your website is very important. So using tools like Lighthouse and Google Analytics integration can help. Lighthouse is an open source tool for running technical website audits. So this tool was developed by Google, and it analyzes different aspects of your website, such as the URL, the performance, accessibility, practices that your website is using, the current SEO ranking. So you can utilize Google's open source application called Lighthouse to analyze all this regarding your website. And you're probably wondering, what is SEO? SEO just means search engine optimization, because you know that search is one of the main ways in which people discover your website online. And SEO is essentially what's going to be used to rank your pages. The higher your website is ranked, the more people are going to be able to see it in the search engine, right? Whenever you go to Google and you put in, what is the best way to become a front-end engineer, you want to make sure that your website or whatever article that you have on your website, say for instance you have a blog, pops up first. So you have to make sure that your website is ranked properly. So you have to increase your search engine optimization. You got to increase your SEO, right, to increase the traffic to your website. Then there's Google Analytics, which is a platform that collects data from your website and your applications, your apps, if you have mobile apps, to create reports and provide insight about what exactly is going through your website, such as click-through rates or the amount of unique users that visited your page, or how long they stayed on your page. Google Analytics can be used for that. So learning this and learning how to optimize your website is pretty important. So learning techniques to optimize your website performance, including lazy loading, code splitting, minification, even small things like compressing. Really, it's a big thing, like compressing your images to make sure that your page loads faster, because say for instance the image is too big, well, it's going to take a long time to gather all the chunks to make sure that your image appear on the website. But if it's compressed, then it's going to load your website faster. So little things like that to make your website more optimized is pretty important to understand. And now you have a very strong foundation. You have JavaScript under your belt, HTML, CSS, a framework. You know about optimization. You know about security. You know about testing and writing clean code. You know about the package manager. But now that you have this skill set, now it's important to try to get a job and to network. So try to do your best to join a community. So join a front-end development community. You could usually find one on Discord, Reddit, Free Code Camp. There's many little forums that you can go and just make sure that you're involved in it, or do your best to at least read through it and understand what people are doing nowadays to further their career. Make sure that you actually create a resume with things like your education level, projects that you created throughout the process, your skill sets. If you want me to make a video on resume structures, then you can leave that down below, leave a comment. But yeah, make sure that your resume is on point. Sometimes just applying will not work. Be sure to network and utilize references with people working in companies you're already interested in. So if you know somebody that's working at Meta or someone that's working at Microsoft, make sure you keep in contact with them and ask them for a reference. References allow for faster access to a company, and most times employees are incentivized to provide references. So if you get hired from their reference, they get a little bonus sometimes. And also utilize, networking or virtual networking opportunities like LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is pretty important. I made a video on that. It's not required, but it just makes it easier to see a face and see what you're working on and your skill set on a online platform, right? So having a LinkedIn is not required, but it can help a lot, right? I got my last job from LinkedIn just from a recruiter DMing me. So nothing wrong with having a LinkedIn. It's free. They do have pay options, but I don't pay for anything on LinkedIn. So try to utilize, platforms like LinkedIn. Try to go to in-person, or maybe if you can't afford in-person, Try to go to virtual conferences, right? Because conferences are a place where people go and network and learn new skill sets. Companies use it as a place to release new software updates or go over new things that they're working on. And there's usually recruiters there to hear about you, right? And or maybe you can just connect with people, and maybe when the opportunity arises later when they're hiring, well, you already have that person that you talk to at a conference randomly. So I know that I went to a conference last year where I was able to get at least 10 or 15 recruiters LinkedIn, and I was already able to reach out to some of them, even though I'm not necessarily looking for anything right now, but they did say whenever I am looking for anything, then I can reach out. So it's just creating that connection, right? And then try to keep in touch with tech news and new software coming out in your community. Continue to increase your skill set. Like I said in a previous video, you're never going to stop learning when you're in tech. So always try to keep in touch with the latest tech news. React can be popular right now, and then a whole new framework comes over and takes over. So you got to make sure that you stay on top of tech, and continue to increase your skill set. And maybe you might learn that, there's different things that you like while learning new skill sets. Like you can learn that you may like UI UX design, or maybe you might want to be a backend engineer instead. These are things that you learn as you learn more skill sets. The journey is over when you stop learning. I agree. So just continue to keep on learning. Hopefully this will help push you to where you're trying to go. I believe these are the proper steps that you can take to become a front engineer going on in the future. This is not a 1 month or 1 week thing. This is a forever thing, or until you want to stop. But it's not just going to be motivation. It's discipline. You're going to have to sit down, stay focused, work on projects, and eventually the work will work, right? And there are many things that you can learn or continue beyond this journey. You can get an understanding of data on your site. You can learn things like GraphQL, WebSocket, streaming, polling. You can learn mobile development, like with frameworks like Flutter and React Native. There is so much things to learn, and I hope I didn't scare you. But like I said, this is not a 1 month journey. It could take years to master, and even then, more tech is released, and this can all become old news. And that's the beauty of tech. You can also mix in some DevOps stuff and learn how to deploy your website to the cloud providers like AWS and Azure. And like I said, add your own domain in the cloud. More problems, more solutions. But hopefully that helped give you guys a basis on how you can become a front engineer. If you have any questions, leave it down in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer. Leave a like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.